大家好啊，攞張被，熄咗盞燈，等3個有關中國嘢嘅恐怖故事。
Quick pick. A little background information. I work at a small Chinese food restaurant and tavern that's been around in my area for at least 50 years. It's located in the downtown area, which is loaded with druggies and drunks all of statures. A lot of our customers are these types of people. Conveniently, we are located in the triangle of 3 low-class bars, which makes late-night visitors even more eccentric. Anyways, getting on, I was working late up at the front, pickup, phone order, delivery area with one of my other coworkers. This man, who reeked of alcohol and looked desperate for a bath, walked in and placed a $3 order for pickup. I took his order, as my coworker was in the kitchen at the time. He made the usual creeper remarks, "You're such a cute little thing," and "Wow, you look too young to have a job, how old are you?" Sadly, these are normal remarks and I shrug them off. So I get his order set up, and I'm standing there behind the counter waiting for my coworker to come back and watch the phone so I can bring his order back. He is sitting across from me in the front booth chair couches, doing what I thought he was, playing with his phone. As she's walking up the hallway, she gives me the stare and immediately calls me over. She pulls me way into the basement and looks at me with crazy eyes. She says, "Hey, I don't want you going back up there. Go in the kitchen until he leaves." I ask why, and she replies, "He was taking lots of pictures of you on his phone. I saw them when I was walking up the way. I even heard the camera shot." Pretty scared at this time, I run into the kitchen and tell them to finish this order ASAP. When they do, I signal for my coworker to come back and give it to him, as he already paid, and get him out. After he leaves, I go back up, and she tells me he asked about me after I left. He asked, "Where did the other girl go? Did she leave for the night? On her way home?" Stuff like that. Obviously, she didn't answer him, but still very creepy. My mom's night of terror. This is a story that my mom told me about when she first moved to America. My mom is Chinese and didn't move to America until she was 18 years old. When she moved here, her mom and dad, as well as her younger siblings, had already been living in America for years and ran a Chinese restaurant. So anyways, my mom moved to America and basically started working at the restaurant. She didn't really know her own parents or siblings that well, since they lived on 2 different continents for basically her entire life. Because of this, she was pretty quiet and shy. The restaurant itself was relatively popular with the local Chinese community, and one of the regulars was a professor at a nearby college. He was well known and respected due to his job. One day, he comes in and asks my grandparents if my mom could babysit his kid because he wanted to go out with his wife. My grandparents asked my mom if she wanted to do that, and my mom agreed. The guy was always pretty friendly, and she decided that she could use the extra cash. My grandparents at the time didn't have a car, so the professor offered to pick her up from the restaurant and take her to his house. So the night comes, and the professor arrives at the restaurant. As always, he's very warm and friendly, and tells my grandparents how much he appreciates the help and whatnot. But then, after they drive off, things start to get kinda creepy. He kept telling my mom to relax and feeling her legs while he's driving. My mom gets scared, but since she's so shy, she doesn't know how to tell him to stop. She then thinks to herself, "Hey, this guy probably won't try these things on me in front of his wife, so as long as she's at the house, he'll stop when we get there." She asked him if his wife is home yet, or was she going to be coming home later before they headed out. He told her that yes, his wife and his kid were home. My mom breathes a sigh of relief, knowing that his creepiness will soon end since they were pulling into the neighborhood. As they pull up, he points out which house it is. It was at that moment that my mom saw that every single light in the house was turned off. Everything was pitch black. If his wife and kid were home, wouldn't they have some lights on? She then says, "Oh, I thought your wife was home." He responds just by saying, "She is." Completely coldly, not with the warmth and friendliness he displayed before. My mom starts to freak out, and she gets even more scared when she sees he's pulling into the garage, not the driveway. They both get out of the car, and he tells her to get inside. She's obviously very hesitant, and he notices this, so he presses the garage button, and the garage door begins to close. Remember, there are absolutely no lights on, so it would be completely pitch dark. My mom immediately goes into flight mode and makes a run for it, rolls under the closing garage door, and bolts down the street while the guy runs after and yells for her to come back. She ran to the nearest house and pounded on the door until they let her in. She explained the entire situation, and they let her call her parents. My grandpa gets a family friend to drive him to the house to pick her up. A few hours later, the guy shows up at the restaurant to apologize for the misunderstanding. My mom refuses to go over by him, but she catches a glance and notices that he had fresh fingernail scratches on his face. She didn't do that to him, so that means he had a run-in with someone else afterwards. My grandparents, being really traditional, didn't want any trouble, so they never did anything about it. They later found out that he's never been married. There is no fate but what we make. Hello everybody, I'm a girl. Grew up on Long Island, the suburbs of New York City. It was as small a town as you can get in that context, so while there were thousands of people and you saw strangers every day, you ran into people you knew just as regularly. Tabitha was my best friend during my teenage years. We were a week apart in age, went to the same high school, lived a block apart, had sleepovers all the time, were inseparable, etc. Tabitha was also, unfortunately, a bit of a stereotypical blonde. While not stupid exactly, she wasn't the tartus Mentos in the tube. She once asked, "Who's he?" when asked about the National Guard, for example, stuff like that. She usually laughed at herself as much as anyone else. My dad was always involved in the local town government and such, which meant he helped organize the yearly flea market, which we all enjoyed. For me, my brother, and our friends, we got to feel important by handing out official Civic Society TM signs. For the rest of the people in the town, they got to conceivably make money off their old crap, except for Larry, of course, who never sold anything. Larry was mid-40s, balding and sleazy. He dressed like it was 1973 and had the same stuff to sell every single year, cassette tapes 10 years out of date, which he, a lame pudgy white guy, would try to hawk using awkward slang to our extremely black and Latino community, cheap costume jewelry and the like. In fact, the only reason I remember his name is because every single year he tried to sell this blinged out keychain that read Larry. Shockingly, it never sold. He was always trying to become friends with my dad because my dad was like slightly important by running the flea market. According to Larry, yes, of course, he was a joke to everyone, especially us kids. We usually just spent all flea market day teasing him and pretending to be interested in his tacky crap to get him to go into this hilarious used car as sales pitch. Then, I remember one year, after the flea market, my dad took me aside. He told me that if Larry ever tried to get me alone, or said something that made me feel weird, or touched me, that I should tell him right away. I was a pretty streetwise Long Island kid, so I understood he was insinuating that Larry was or might have been a creep in some sexual way. Apparently, other adults knew and suspected this too, because I noticed they never left us alone with him. This was before the internet makes sex offender registries public, so I never knew what the details were, but in either case, word quickly spread amongst us kids that Larry was creepy as hell. Anyways, fast forward some years. Tabitha and I are both 13, freshman year of high school. Typically after school, we'd walk down to the town's main street, Beach Avenue, where there's a CVS, pizza place, Chinese food restaurant, etc. Whereupon we blow our allowance gossiping over snacks, the usual teenage routine. And Larry, by this time, had taken to walking this self-same street with his cardboard box full of crisscross cassettes, trying his sales pitch on whichever poor sucker he could corner. Maybe he thought the flea market was limiting him, I don't know. The point is, he was lurking out there, still as tacky and weird as ever. We all found creative ways to avoid him, though by this time, it was rare we ever got caught, maybe once a year. Anyways, so this particular incident happened on a Saturday. I wake up to a call from Tabitha, who sounds breathless and impatient on the phone. It turns out she had a nightmare that we'd gone to the place on Beach Avenue, where Larry had turned up, cornered her, and raped her. Jesus Christ, I said. Yeah, she says. So you want to get some Chinese food? The Chinese food place is literally right next to the pizza place on Beach Avenue. I reply. She explains that in her dream, it was the pizza place where the violent rape happened, not the Chinese place, so it's silly to be afraid. Okay, but whatever. I wasn't the one assaulted in her dream, and I'm hungry. We meet up and walk the 2 blocks to Shichun Garden, best Chinese food on the East Coast. I'll hear no arguments, and order a couple of egg rolls, then talk about the gossip as girls are wanting to do. We're having a great time until Larry shows up. I'm sitting on the side of the table that faces the window, so I'm the first to notice him across the street, pacing with his cassettes and trying in vain to find a prospective buyer. I choose not to tell Tabitha this, however, because she's prone to be a bit hysterical and because I'm kind of at a loss for words myself. It's been probably a year and a half since either of us has seen this guy, and now, the night after Tabitha's prophetic dream, here he is. Too late, because he's seen us from across the street and is headed this way. Tabitha doesn't notice my silence until the bell over the Chinese place dings. Hey! Larry slides into the empty seat next to Tabitha, his arm resting casually by her head, almost around her shoulders. He starts into his sleazy, sweet-talking routine, seemingly unaware of Tabitha's frozen, terrified silence and my slack-jawed shock. So what grade are you girls in this? He starts to say, but Tabitha interrupts him by climbing literally on top of her chair, her hands spread to either side like a traffic cop. She's still refusing to look at him when she shrieks, "I think you need to get away from me!" Everyone's staring at her. Me, Larry, the Chinese food guys behind the counter. "Right now!" she screams at the top of her lungs, and Larry leaps to his feet, his box of cassettes clattering to the floor. I didn't do anything," he yells. "I didn't touch you, you saw." He turns to me, the daughter of the town's flea market organizer. You know, the one with the connections? "I didn't touch her, I didn't touch her." I stare at him, and Tabitha still standing on her chair, dumbly, my mouth full of egg roll. "I didn't touch anyone," he yells, gathering up his cassettes and fleeing. Now maybe I'm misjudging Larry. Maybe he was a perfectly harmless, creepy asshole, and his telling reaction to Tabitha's hysteria was just a coincidence, right? All I know is that I'll never really learn what his history was, and none of us ever saw Larry ever again in that big-ass town.